"You're jealous of my happiness," my daughter spat when I exposed her cheating boyfriend. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my door begging for forgiveness. My daughter used to call me every single Sunday morning, right before breakfast. Usually, I was standing in my small kitchen with wet hair, one fuzzy sock on, pretending I was about to meal prep for the week like the kind of woman who actually had her life together. She'd ask what I was making. I'd say black coffee and maybe a slice of toast if I was feeling particularly ambitious. And she would laugh. She'd laugh like that was some adorable, quirky little family tradition instead of undeniable proof that a single woman in her 50s can survive almost entirely on caffeine, sheer spite, and whatever stale crackers are hiding at the bottom of her work tote. That was our thing. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a movie-perfect mother-daughter montage. It was just us. We'd have Sunday lunch if she wasn't drowning in work. We'd have long phone calls if she was busy. We'd share little, meaningless complaints about her rising rent, her demanding clients, and the guy in the apartment above her, who apparently walked like he was moving heavy oak furniture with his bare feet. Normal stuff. Safe stuff. The kind of boring, everyday routine you don't realize is incredibly precious until someone starts replacing it with cheap excuses. I'm Clara, by the way. I am 53 years old, a divorced dental hygienist, and the very proud owner of a 2-bedroom condo with hideous mustard yellow bathroom tiles that I still haven't replaced. Every time I price out a renovation, I suddenly become deeply emotionally attached to the ugly tile. I make decent money. Not vacation in Europe money, but decent. About $5,200 a month before I remember that taxes exist and the government takes its cut. After 15 years of working at the exact same dental clinic, bending over backward, literally I had gotten very good at stretching my chronic physical exhaustion into a mask of polite professionalism. I raised my daughter mostly alone after my divorce. That is the polite, socially acceptable way of saying her father sent a check when it was convenient for his wallet and showed up when he wanted to feel like a super dad without doing any of the actual heavy lifting. I don't say that to sound bitter. I mean, I am bitter, but I've earned my seasoning. My daughter, Chloe, is 26. She is incredibly creative, fiercely stubborn, and funny in a sharp way that could cut your knees right out from under you. She was absolutely convinced that being a freelance copywriter meant ultimate freedom. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it meant she was eating dry cereal at midnight on a Tuesday because a massive corporate client forgot to pay her invoice for the 3rd week in a row. She had been dating her boyfriend for a little over a year when all of this really started going downhill. His name was Liam. He was 31, worked as a tech recruiter for some bloated Silicon Valley startup, and had the exact kind of slick charm that people compliment because they don't actually have to live with it. In public, he was polite to me. Too polite, honestly. It was the kind of polite where every single sentence had an artificial shine on it, like he was obsessively polishing a glass that no one asked him to touch. The first few Sunday lunches Chloe canceled didn't bother me much. She was busy. He was busy. They had new relationship plans. But then it became every other week. Then 3 weeks in a row. Then she would start saying things on the phone like, "Liam has had a really hard week, Mom." She said it as if my wanting to eat a simple chicken salad sandwich with my only child was a direct act of violence against his fragile nervous system. I'd laugh it off because nobody wants to be the needy, clingy mother. Nobody wants to be the divorced woman sitting alone in her paid-off condo, staring at her phone screen like a desperate teenager waiting for a crush to text back. So, I played it normal. I said, "No problem at all, honey. Enjoy your weekend." And then I ate my lunch standing up at my kitchen counter because sitting alone at the dining table felt entirely too dramatic. Yes, I know exactly how pathetic that sounds. Let me have my shame in peace. The insidious little comments started small, and always conveniently when Chloe wasn't in the room. They were always delivered with just enough softness that if I repeated them to her, I would sound like a paranoid, ridiculous old woman. Once, while she was in the bedroom grabbing her winter coat, Liam looked around my condo, smirked, and said, "It must be really nice, not needing much space when it's just you." I just stared at him. What do you even do with a comment like that? Throw a napkin at his face? Ask him to define the word just? Another time, after Chloe joked about me picking up extra shifts at the clinic to pay for new tires, he smiled his perfectly rehearsed smile and said, "Some people just don't know how to stop being needed." He said it like a clinical observation, not an insult. That was his favorite little trick. He wrapped the blade in velvet and acted incredibly confused when you started bleeding. The very first time I truly felt my stomach turn was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had gotten off work early because a patient canceled their deep cleaning last minute, and my office manager practically shoved me out the door before I could find busy work. I had a warm container of homemade lasagna sitting in my passenger seat and this foolish, impulsive idea that I'd surprise Chloe at her apartment. Not a huge surprise. No balloons, no confetti, just lasagna, because she had mentioned fighting a bad cold the night before. I drove over and knocked on her door. No answer. I used the spare key she had given me 3 years earlier, back when having a key meant deep trust and not trespassing. I opened the door. Liam was there. He was standing dead center in her living room, holding her phone. His thumb was moving rapidly over the screen, and his face was completely flat in a cold, calculating way I had never seen when he was performing for an audience. Chloe was in the shower. I could hear the water running loudly through the thin apartment walls. Liam looked up at me. He looked at me like I had just walked into his personal living room, completely naked and dripping wet mud all over his rugs. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Not hi, Clara, not Chloe's in the shower, not even his trademark fake politeness, just that cold, aggressive demand. I lifted the reusable grocery bag like an absolute idiot. Chloe said she wasn't feeling well. I brought food. His eyes dropped to the bag, then snapped back to my face. "You should have called first." I blinked, taken aback. I texted her. She didn't answer. "She's busy." He clipped back. "She's in the shower," I pointed out, gesturing toward the bathroom. I said, "She's busy." He stared me down, and then, as if flipping a switch, the fake smile returned. "I'll tell her you stopped by. She'll really appreciate it." I left the lasagna on the kitchen counter and walked out without waiting for my daughter to appear. In the elevator ride down to the lobby, I desperately told myself that I had just startled him. I told myself that maybe he had been answering an urgent client email for her. I told myself a dozen different lies because the alternative was admitting that my bright, independent daughter might be living with a man who felt entirely entitled to her phone, her time, her physical space, and eventually, if I kept blinking and looking away, her entire life. Once I started truly paying attention, the pattern became embarrassingly obvious. And I say embarrassingly because I kept wondering how much I had completely missed while trying so hard not to be that overbearing mother. Chloe canceled a birthday dinner with her favorite cousin. Then she canceled drinks with an old college roommate. Then she backed out of a weekend cabin trip with her best friend, Mia. Mia was the kind of best friend who had been glued to Chloe's side since they were awkward 15-year-olds with bad haircuts. Every single excuse Chloe gave had Liam's shadow lingering in it. He was too tired. He had a mandatory work event. He didn't feel safe in that particular neighborhood. He thought that specific friend was too negative for her energy. He just wanted them to have quality time. It sounds sweet until you realize that his version of quality time was eating every other relationship in her life like black mold. He also started showing up wherever she was. At first, Chloe described it to me like it was a grand romance. "He surprised me at the coffee shop," she'd say, her voice beaming. "He brought me a matcha latte. He just happened to be in the neighborhood. He worries because I forget to eat when I'm writing." Cute, right? Except I had once been married to a man who just happened to drive past my dental clinic. A man who just happened to ask exactly who I was laughing with in the break room. A man who just happened to hate every single friend who told me I looked exhausted. So, when Chloe giggled about her boyfriend magically appearing at her shared co-working space in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, I didn't hear romance. I heard a warden checking on his inmate. I tried to bring it up gently. That was my first major mistake, because to a stubborn 26-year-old, gentle sounds exactly like permission to ignore you. We were sitting in my kitchen on a rare Sunday visit. She was eating leftover pasta straight out of the Tupperware container because apparently, ceramic plates are only for women who don't have impending project deadlines. I took a sip of my coffee and asked, "Does it ever feel like Liam is around a lot when you're trying to work?" She looked up, instantly annoyed. The wall slammed down. "He's supportive, Mom." "I'm not saying he isn't," I replied calmly. "I'm just asking if you still feel like you get enough space to breathe." "Mom," that one word. It was a heavy, exhausted warning before I had even crossed a line. "What?" I asked, a little too quickly. "You do this." "Do what?" I countered. "You find phantom problems in perfectly good relationships just because yours didn't work out. It's really not fair to me," she snapped. I felt a hot sting in my chest. "Chloe, that's not." She sighed heavily. "I know. I'm sorry. I just mean, you worry way too much. We're fine." Then, 2 weeks later, her cousin accidentally told me about the money. It happened at my mother's house during one of those mandatory family Sunday afternoons where everyone pretends the dry, store-bought pound cake is delicious because nobody wants to hurt the feelings of the aunt who brought it. Chloe wasn't there. She had canceled at the last minute because Liam had something important that day. Her cousin and I were in the kitchen washing the dessert plates when she said, entirely too casually, "Hey, did Chloe tell you about the new joint account?" I froze. My hands were submerged in soapy water, holding a wet ceramic plate. "What joint account?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Her cousin instantly made that horrified face people make when they realize they have just stepped barefoot onto an active landmine. "Oh, maybe she was going to tell you later." My voice came out dead calm, which was honestly a medical miracle because my blood pressure was actively trying to launch itself out of my skull. "How much, Sarah?" I asked. She dried her hands incredibly slowly, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know the exact number, Clara," I think she said. $10,000. $10,000, my daughter's entire life savings, her absolute emergency safety net. The little financial cushion she had painstakingly built from dealing with ugly client revisions, working late nights until her eyes burned, eating cheap ramen dinners, and fighting off freelance panic. $10,000 dumped into a joint account with a man who corrected her daily schedule like he owned the copyright to her calendar. The day I finally caught him, I wasn't even looking for drama. I was just trying to fix a nightmare tax issue for my elderly mother, which is its own special kind of emotional hostage situation. I had spent 45 agonizing minutes on hold with the local tax office, been blindly transferred 3 times, and finally decided to just drive to the physical office because sometimes you need to look a human being directly in the eyes while they ruin your afternoon. The tax office was located in a busy outdoor strip mall that had a trendy, overpriced bakery upstairs. It was one of those hipster places with excessive ferns hanging from the ceiling and croissants that cost enough to make you rethink modern democracy. I was walking aggressively past the bakery's large glass windows, annoyed, hungry, and clutching a manila folder stuffed with my mother's financial papers when I saw him. At first, my brain literally tried to reject the visual information like a corrupted file. No, it couldn't be. He was sitting in the far back corner booth, angled slightly away from the main walkway, wearing the exact same dark gray cashmere sweater I had seen him wear at a family dinner the week prior. Sitting directly across from him was Mia, my daughter's best friend. The exact same best friend who had mysteriously vanished from Chloe's Instagram posts, her birthday dinners, and her casual daily mentions. The girl Chloe used to jokingly call her emergency contact for emotional crimes. They were leaning across the small cafe table, their faces inches apart. Mia's hand was resting flat on the tabletop. Liam's hand was completely covering hers. It wasn't an accidental brush of knuckles. It wasn't him comforting a sad friend. His thumb was moving slowly, deliberately, over the soft skin of her hand in this familiar and intimate little circle that made my stomach twist so violently. I almost dropped my mother's tax folder right there on the concrete. That was enough. I didn't storm in. I didn't bang on the glass. I turned around on my heel and walked straight back to the parking garage. I got into my sedan and sat in the driver's seat for 40 solid minutes. I know it was 40 minutes because I kept staring at the dashboard clock, desperately waiting for the glowing green numbers to somehow explain what the hell I had just witnessed. I called Chloe once. It went straight to voicemail. I hung up. I dialed again, then panicked and canceled the call before it could even ring. What on earth was I going to say? Hi, honey, funny story. I just saw your controlling boyfriend stroking your childhood best friend's hand like they share a toothbrush. There is absolutely no graceful way to deliver a sentence like that. By the next morning, my eyes were swollen shut from crying, and I still had to go to the dental clinic. I walked into work with a face that screamed severe seasonal allergies and a soul that felt like an active crime scene. During my lunch break, I typed out and deleted a text message to my daughter at least a dozen times. It was always too dramatic, or too vague, or too cold, or too motherly. Finally, I settled on. I need to talk to you about something really important. Can we meet for lunch on Monday? Just you and me. She replied 3 hours later. Is everything okay? No, literally nothing was okay. But I typed back, physically, yes. I just really need to talk. She sent a single thumbs up emoji. Monday arrived at a glacial pace, and then all at once. I changed my outfit 4 times before leaving the house because apparently there is a specific dress code for I am about to nuke your entire romantic life, and I could not find it in my closet. I finally settled on dark jeans and a plain sweater because my scrubs felt too exhausted, and anything nicer felt like I was putting on a theatrical performance. We met at a small, quiet soup and sandwich place near her apartment building. She arrived 15 minutes late, breathless, profusely apologizing because Liam had urgently called right as she was walking out the door. Of course he had. His radar for her independence was flawless. I waited patiently until we ordered. I waited until the teenage server walked away with our menus. I looked across the table at my beautiful daughter's face. I saw the tiny, familiar crease forming between her eyebrows, the one she always got when she was bracing herself for bad news, and for one awful, cowardly second, I wanted to just talk about the weather. Instead, I took a breath and said, Chloe, I saw Liam on Saturday afternoon. She blinked, confused. Okay? I saw him with Mia. Her expression shifted so violently it physically hurt to watch. It wasn't surprise. It was pure, instantaneous defense. It was like a steel wall dropped directly from the ceiling. I kept my voice low and steady. They were at the bakery upstairs at the strip mall near the tax office. Chloe. They were holding hands, intimately. She just stared at me. I am not saying this lightly, I pleaded. I know exactly what I saw. She leaned back in her wooden chair, crossing her arms tightly. No, I'm sorry, Mom, but no. Chloe, you're not listening. No, you're not. That hit me right in the center of me. Bappa. What? I gasped. You have been waiting for something like this, she hissed, her voice trembling. Please don't do this to me right now. I am not doing anything to you. I am trying to protect you. You are. Her voice shook, but not with sadness or betrayal. It shook with pure, unadulterated anger. You don't like him. You have never liked him from day one. I never said that. You didn't have to. It is written all over your face every single time the man speaks. You judge everything he does. Chloe, I saw them holding hands. Maybe it was his older brother. They look exactly alike from a distance. I actually stopped breathing for a second. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. His brother, Chloe, they were holding hands. He was stroking her fingers. You are seeing what you want to see to protect him. There it was. I had spoken the truth, but it was the exact sentence that took my knees out. I tried to reach across the table. Honey, I know how much this hurts. No, you do not get to honey me. She violently pushed her bowl of soup away, the broth spilling slightly over the edge. Maybe it's just physically impossible for you to see me happy in a successful relationship because you never figured out how to be happy in your own. I could have slapped the table. I could have screamed. I could have listed every single terrifying night I stayed awake pressing cold washcloths to her forehead when she had a fever. Every single utility bill I paid alone. Every school play her father conveniently missed. Every single time I swallowed my own crushing loneliness so she wouldn't have to taste it. Instead, I went dead quiet. That silence wasn't noble. It was pure shock. My own daughter had just reached into the oldest, softest, most painful part of my soul and squeezed it as hard as she could. I paid the lunch bill in silence because I literally did not know what else to do with my hands. She walked out without looking back. That very night, Liam called me. Clara, he said. His voice was as calm and sterile as a dentist about to extract a tooth. I think we should talk. My skin instantly crawled. Why are you calling me? Because there has clearly been a massive misunderstanding, he purred. No, Liam, there hasn't. He gave this tiny, patronizing little laugh. It wasn't amused. It was entirely controlled. I understand exactly how it looked from a distance, Clara. But Mia and I were planning a surprise for Chloe. Her friend wanted my help coordinating it. It's a surprise that required a lot of emotional planning. She was crying, Clara. She was emotional. I was comforting her. Do you honestly think I am stupid? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. I didn't wait for his answer. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. The next day at the clinic, I cornered my closest coworker in the break room. If I kept this inside my head for one more hour, it was going to crawl out of my mouth while I was scraping plaque off a patient's molars. She and I had worked side by side for 15 years. She had seen me cry through my divorce. She didn't gasp. She didn't tell me to call the police or confront everyone with a baseball bat. She just listened, chewing aggressively on the inside of her cheek. And then she delivered the hardest truth I had ever heard. Clara, you need hard proof. I believe you. I know you saw them, but your daughter will never believe you. Not yet. She leaned across the sticky break room table, lowering her voice. Every single time you push her without solid proof, he gets to call you crazy. He gets to call you unstable. He gets to tell her you're a bitter, interfering old woman. Stop giving that bastard free ammunition. I hated how absolutely right she was. I went home and started digging. I noticed that Mia had practically vanished from Chloe's online life, like someone had taken digital scissors to every single thread connecting them. No tagged photos, no comments, no inside jokes left under old posts. Absolute silence. When I casually texted Chloe a few days later asking, "How is Mia doing lately?" she simply replied, "Fine." The tone of that one word had teeth. Then, a neighbor in Chloe's apartment, building an older woman who knew me because she once helped me carry heavy groceries when Chloe had a sprained ankle, casually mentioned something that made my blood run cold. I was dropping off a piece of misdelivered mail in the lobby when she smiled and said, "Your daughter's handsome young man has sure been around a lot lately. Or maybe I'm just mixing up his car. I swear I see a black sedan exactly like his parked over near that other girl's building 2 streets down all the time, too." I felt the floor drop out from under me. What other girl? She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, you know, the friend, the one with the cute short hair. Mia, right? Anyway, maybe it's not his car. I don't want to be a gossip." I pulled out my phone in the lobby and messaged Mia directly. Just one line. "Can we talk sometime this week? Nothing dramatic. I just want to check in." She didn't answer for 3 agonizing days. Before Mia finally replied, Chloe called me. Her voice was bright, terrifyingly, artificially bright. "Mom, we are doing a family dinner this Friday." "We are?" I asked cautiously. "Yes, family dinner. Grandma is coming, Uncle Dave, a couple of friends. Nothing huge." I sat down hard on the edge of my mattress. "Okay, and?" She paused, taking a shaky breath. "We're going to announce something." My hand went ice cold around the phone. I didn't even have to ask. She told me anyway, the words rushing out. Liam proposed. "Last night." "Last night," I repeated, sounding like a broken toy. "I know you are going to have feelings about this, Mom. I am your mother, Chloe. I have organs. Feelings are naturally included in the package." She sighed heavily, the familiar wall going back up. "Please, Mom, please don't make this hard for me." I closed my eyes. I will be there. UP Date 1. The engagement dinner and the confession. Friday night, I arrived at the restaurant with a strict battle plan. I really did. I was going to arrive 20 minutes early, physically pull my daughter aside into the coat room, and say, "Before you announce anything to this family, I need you to look me in the eyes and truly hear me." I practiced the speech in my car. I practiced it while carrying a bottle of expensive red wine I didn't even want to bring, because celebrating this felt like lying with a cork. But Liam had planned the entire evening like a strict military operation, if military operations involved charcuterie boards and fake tea light candles. Within 20 minutes of me arriving, before I could even get Chloe alone, he stood up at the head of the table. He tapped a silver spoon against his wine glass, smiled his million-dollar smile, and announced the engagement. Phones instantly came out to record. My elderly mother cried happy tears. My brother aggressively hugged him. Someone down the table yelled, "Finally," and I wanted to evaporate directly through the hardwood floorboards. Chloe held out her left hand, and the diamond ring flashed aggressively under the dim dining room lights. She looked so happy. No, wait, that's not entirely fair. She didn't look happy. She looked relieved. She looked like the shiny ring finally proved something she had been secretly terrified wasn't actually true. I stood near the back window with my wine entirely untouched, watching my family celebrate inside a house that I could clearly see was burning to the ground. Liam cornered me in the kitchen later while I was pretending to rinse a dessert plate that was already clean. "You've been awfully quiet tonight, Clara," he noted, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm just taking it all in," I replied without looking at him. "I really hope you can find it in your heart to be happy for her." I finally looked up at him. I smiled, because I was raised by a tough woman who taught me that you could be absolutely furious and still maintain your manners. "I just hope you are actually worth everything she is giving up for you, Liam." His jaw tightened, just a fraction of an inch, but I saw it. The mask slipped. Then, Chloe walked into the kitchen, and he instantly turned warm and golden again. "Your mom and I were just having a lovely chat, baby." She looked between the two of us, her guard instantly up. "About what?" "Just about how incredibly happy we both are," he lied smoothly, kissing her temple, her face completely closed off toward me for the rest of the night. As we were leaving, my brother, the one who had previously called Liam a go-getter, pulled me aside near the coat rack. "He seems a little intense tonight, doesn't he?" I stared at my brother. "Intense? You mean like he's violently managing the entire room?" My brother frowned. Interesting way to put it. But yeah, maybe. I got to my car and immediately messaged Mia again. "I know there is something going on. I need to talk to you before this gets infinitely worse for everyone involved. Tuesday, coffee." She finally replied the next morning. "Okay, Tuesday." Before Tuesday arrived, Chloe called me in a tone I had never, ever heard from her. It wasn't exactly angry. It was formal. It was rehearsed. It was the tone of someone who had been coached on how to speak to a toxic person. "Liam told me you are harassing Mia," she said coldly. I closed my eyes. Of course he told her. Of course he had access to her phone or had manipulated Mia into telling him. He always had to control the narrative. "I asked to talk to her, Chloe. That's all." "Why?" "Because I think there are things you desperately need to know." "No, Mom. You think you get to dig through my personal life just because you don't approve of my fiancé. I am warning you right now. If you keep doing this, if you keep trying to sabotage my happiness, I do not know how we come back from it." That sentence landed on my chest like a bank vault door locking shut. "I love you," I said, my voice breaking. "That is exactly why I cannot promise to stop." She hung up on me. Tuesday morning, I arrived at the coffee shop 30 minutes early because apparently, severe anxiety makes you incredibly punctual. I chose a table in the far back. When Mia finally walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. My daughter's best friend had always been loud, vibrant, and warm. She was the kind of woman who hugged you with her entire upper body and wore massive, colorful earrings that looked like modern art projects. That day, she looked physically smaller. She looked exhausted, completely devoid of makeup, with her oversized hoodie sleeves pulled down entirely over her hands like a frightened child. She sat down heavily across from me and didn't even look at the menu. "I don't want to be in the middle of this, Clara," she mumbled, staring at the table. I almost snapped. "You put yourself in the middle of this," but I swallowed the venom, barely. "I am not here to attack you, Mia." She let out a dry, ugly laugh. "That's generous. I saw you with him, at the bakery, 2 weeks ago." Her face instantly went ash gray. She looked like she was going to be physically sick. It's not what you think it is." I said absolutely nothing. I just stared at her. Sometimes, dead silence is the absolute best way to force a liar to keep talking. "It's complicated," she whispered. "Complicated is when your parking meter expires while you're in the waiting room at the dentist," I replied coldly. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. I showed her my typed notes, the exact dates, the neighbor's comment about the car, the canceled weekend trips, the vanishing social media posts, the $10,000 joint account. My hands were perfectly steady, which shocked me, because inside my chest, my heart felt like it was made of broken glass. "Is there something romantic going on between you and Liam?" I asked, leaving zero room for interpretation. She didn't answer right away. She pressed the heels of her palms violently into her eyes. For a terrible second, she looked like someone trying to physically push herself backward in time. "It started way before," she finally whispered, her voice cracking. "Before what?" "Before they got engaged." Before a lot of things. My stomach violently turned over. She immediately began spilling excuses. Of course she did. People never confess by walking straight into the fire. They always circle it first and complain about how bad the smoke smells. She said Liam had been deeply unhappy. She said Chloe just didn't understand the pressure he was under. She said Liam made her feel truly seen in a way no one else ever had. She said she knew it was morally wrong, but it just didn't feel simple. She said she tried to break it off 3 times, but he always came crying back to her apartment. She said all the pathetic, predictable things people say when they want the ugly truth to arrive, wearing a slightly nicer outfit. How long, Mia? I demanded. She wiped under her nose with her hoodie sleeve. More than a year and a half. A year and a half? Why on earth are you sitting here telling me this now? She looked up at me then, and I saw genuine, unadulterated fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, fear of the monster she had helped build. Because he's not just cheating on her, Clara, she choked out. My throat seized up. What the hell does that mean? She reached into her pocket with a trembling hand and pulled out her phone. Her fingers visibly shook as she unlocked it and opened a hidden, password-protected folder of screenshots in her photo app. He talks about money, a lot, specifically, about your mother's lake house property. Mia slowly turned the phone around and slid it across the table toward me. The text messages were infinitely worse than I could have ever imagined, and I had already expected the worst. I read them in horror. Liam had explicitly written to Mia that Chloe was emotionally easy to manage as long as you keep her feeling like she's the chosen one. He had written that the marriage certificate would make everything legally cleaner. He had written extensively about the current market value of my mother's lake house property. He joked about how my mother was old, but stubbornly healthy enough to be annoying. Most horrifyingly, he bragged to Mia about how getting Chloe comfortable with the $10,000 joint account was just training practice. Practice. Like my brilliant, beautiful daughter, was a disobedient dog learning not to pee on the rug. I read the messages incredibly slowly, not because I needed the time to comprehend the words, but because if I reacted as fast as my brain wanted to, I was going to throw her phone through the coffee shop window. Mia whispered, "I know. I'm so sorry. I know." "No," I snapped, my voice finally sharp. "You do not get to say you know. Not like this." She started crying harder, her shoulders heaving. I took a deep, ragged breath to steady myself. "Send every single one of these screenshots to me right now." "I can't," she panicked, pulling the phone back slightly. "You can, and you will. What if he finds out? What, Mia, gets mad at you? He is actively planning to legally bind himself to my daughter to steal my family's money while simultaneously sleeping in your bed. We are way past worrying about him being mad." She sent them. I watched the notifications pop up on my screen one by one. Then, I forced her to email the entire folder to a backup account she rarely used, just to ensure they were saved somewhere he couldn't physically touch them. I am not a tech-savvy woman by any means, but I have watched enough true crime to know that men who obsessively control narratives also love deleting hard evidence. Date 2. The Trap and the Breakup. I texted Chloe on Wednesday morning and asked her to come over to my condo on Thursday evening after work. I told her I had found some of her old childhood tax documents she needed for her freelance filing. I absolutely did not tell her that Mia would be sitting in my living room, because if I had, she never would have walked through the door. Was it highly manipulative? Yes, it was. I am not going to sit here on the internet and pretend I handled this entire nightmare like a graceful saint wearing comfortable shoes. I was desperate. I was terrified for her future. I chose to build a trap because every single honest door I had tried to open had been deadbolted from the other side by Liam. Chloe arrived at 6 p.m., wearing her comfortable work clothes, her hair clipped up messily, and her eyes heavily guarded. Mia was already sitting on my floral couch, obsessively twisting a tissue in her hands until it looked like a piece of wet paper rope. Chloe stopped dead in the doorway. The color instantly drained from her face. "What the hell is this?" I stood up from the armchair. "Chloe, please come in and close the door." "No." She looked at me like I had suddenly shape-shifted into a monster. "Are you out of your mind? You ambushed me?" "I did," I admitted firmly. "I did ambush you, and I am deeply sorry for that part, but you need to sit down and hear this." She let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "This is completely insane. I'm leaving." Mia whimpered her name. "Chloe, please." Chloe turned on her so fast and with so much fury that I physically stepped forward, ready to intervene. "Don't," Chloe snarled, pointing a shaking finger at her former best friend. "Don't you dare sit in my mother's apartment and act sad right now." "Sit down," I said softly, but with the heavy authority of a mother who has reached her limit, or stand. "I really don't care. Just listen for 5 uninterrupted minutes. After that, you can walk out that door and hate me for the rest of your life if you want to." "Don't say that," she snapped. "I mean it." She stayed by the door, her arms crossed like shields. Mia began speaking. She began badly. She was halting, she stuttered, she stopped, and started over. She apologized way too early and way too much, making Chloe physically flinch with every single detail she dropped. But eventually, the whole ugly truth spilled out onto my living room rug. She admitted to the year-and-a-half-long affair. She clarified that it was not just one drunken mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness or confusion. It was a calculated, repeated choice that slowly morphed into an entire secondary relationship happening right behind Chloe's back. Chloe didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. Honestly, that terrified me far more than screaming would have. Her face just went entirely blank. It settled into this awful, polished, deadened mask. Then, I unlocked my phone and pulled up the screenshots. I walked over and held the phone out to her. At first, she aggressively refused to take it. "No, read them, Chloe," I pleaded. "No, Mom, please, read them." She snatched the phone out of my hand like she wanted to shatter the glass against the wall. Her eyes darted across the screen, once, twice. Then her thumb started scrolling, slowly. The living room got so agonizingly quiet that I could clearly hear my old refrigerator humming in the kitchen, like it had actively chosen a side in the fight. When she finally reached the specific messages where Liam discussed the property value of her grandmother's lake house and how her $10,000 joint account was practice, her knees physically buckled. She didn't faint, but she just dropped heavily into the wooden dining chair near the entryway, like her legs had officially given their 2 weeks' notice. "He said that?" she whispered, her voice sounding incredibly small. Mia nodded, openly sobbing now. Chloe slowly looked up at me. She wasn't angry anymore. The anger had evaporated into something infinitely worse, pure, unadulterated humiliation. "Mom, did you know about Grandma's lake house property?" "I knew she always planned to leave it to you in her will someday," I said gently. "I did not know your fiancé was discussing it like it was his personal real estate inventory." Without another word, Chloe pulled out her own phone and called Liam. She put it on speaker. "Hey, baby," his voice chimed through the speaker, sickeningly sweet. "Can you come over to my mom's condo right now? It's really important. Is everything okay? Just come over." She hung up. She didn't stop me from being there. Maybe she wanted him to try and explain it. Maybe I just wanted a front row seat to watch him confidently walk into a room where his funhouse mirrors finally stopped working. He arrived 20 minutes later. He walked through the door looking impeccably clean, perfectly composed, and wearing a look of deep, theatrical concern, like it was a prop he bought at a store. Then, he fully stepped into the room and saw the three of us staring at him. His face instantly changed. It wasn't a massive reaction, but it was enough. The micro-expression of a rat realizing the cage door just slammed shut. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave. Chloe stood up and held my phone directly in his face, the screen glowing with his own words. "Explain this to me." He didn't panic. That was the most terrifying part of his entire pathology. He didn't rush to deny it. He calmly looked at the glowing screen, then slowly looked over at Mia crying on the couch, and he let out a heavy, exhausted sigh. It was the exact sigh of a tired, rational man being forced to deal with a room full of hysterical, emotional women. "She's completely obsessed with me, Chloe," he said smoothly. Mia made a strangled sound in the back of her throat like she had just been physically struck. He turned his full, intense focus onto Chloe. "I am so sorry. I really should have told you she had developed obsessive feelings for me months ago. I didn't want to destroy your friendship with her." Chloe just stared at him, her face unreadable. He continued, his voice getting smoother, more rhythmic. "Your mother has been desperately looking for a reason to destroy us since day one. You know this, baby. She found someone vulnerable and unstable like Mia, and she used her to create fake text messages just to poison you against me." I stepped forward. "Get out of my house." He completely ignored me, stepping closer to my daughter. "Baby, look at me." Chloe didn't move. "Look at me," he repeated, his tone snapping with a sharp, commanding edge. That did it. That was the fatal error. Her eyes slowly lifted to meet his, but they were no longer soft, confused, or devastated. They were completely dead. "Get out," Chloe said. Her voice didn't shake. He let out a short, arrogant laugh. "Are you serious? This is your plan? You're going to let your bitter mother poison you against your future husband with some fake, photoshopped screenshots?" Mia suddenly stood up from the couch, screaming, "They are real, Liam. Stop lying." He pointed a violently aggressive finger at Mia. "You need serious psychiatric help, you crazy bitch." Chloe physically flinched at the venom in his voice. I saw it. He saw it too. And for the very first time that entire evening, I think Liam finally understood that he had massively overplayed his hand. It wasn't the proof of the cheating that broke the spell. It wasn't even the texts about the money. It was his tone, the absolute, unyielding command hiding just under the fake concern. The raw contempt violently slipping out of its velvet wrapping. He finally left when Chloe looked him dead in the eyes and said, very quietly, "If you do not leave right now, I will call the police." Not when I yelled at him, not when Mia sobbed, when Chloe threatened him. He turned and slammed my front door so hard the picture frames rattled against the drywall, but Chloe didn't follow him. Afterward, nobody in the room knew what to do with their hands. Mia kept frantically apologizing, the words tumbling over each other. Chloe finally held up a hand and told her to stop, her voice completely flat. Then, Chloe picked up her purse and said, "I need to leave." I wanted so desperately to grab her, to hold her, to beg her not to disappear into the dark with all that fresh pain alone. But I had already trapped her once that night, so I forced myself to step aside. At the door, she looked back at me. "Don't text me tonight, Mom." I nodded. "I won't." UP Date 3, the final night and the searches. The next few days were a very special, agonizing kind of hell because absolutely nothing happened loudly. There was no dramatic breakup post on social media. There was no late-night tearful apology call from Chloe. There was no family emergency meeting. There was just a suffocating silence. I went to work at the clinic. I came home. I checked my phone so often, it felt like the device owed me back rent. I made a massive pot of soup and then completely forgot to eat it. My coworker asked if I was holding up okay, and I said, "Sure," which is universal healthcare worker code for, "Please do not ask me about my trauma under these fluorescent lights." Mia, however, kept completely unraveling. She texted me another massive piece of the puzzle 2 days after the confrontation, and I almost hated her more for the timing of it than the actual information. She confessed that she and Liam had actually dated briefly before he ever got together with Chloe. "Not officially," she wrote, which made me want to throw a heavy spoon at the wall. They had talked. They had slept together. It lasted about 3 months. Mia claimed she ended it because Liam got way too possessive and controlling way too quickly. And then, when Liam started pursuing Chloe at a mutual party, he begged Mia not to mention their history because it would make things weird and ruin his chances. I sat at my kitchen table reading that long paragraph and felt something deep inside my chest go absolutely ice cold. He hadn't just stumbled into my daughter's life and then tragically fallen into a moment of betrayal. He had entered her life already intimately knowing her best friend. He already understood the specific weak spots and insecurities between them. He was already holding a massive secret that would make honesty incredibly inconvenient for everyone involved except for him. He had orchestrated the entire dynamic from day one. I forwarded the new screenshots to Chloe. Just the images. No commentary, no "see, I told you." I would rather swallow a handful of gravel than become the kind of mother who gloats with an "I told you so" while her child is actively bleeding out. She didn't respond. When she finally called me late that night, her voice sounded incredibly small. "Did you know they had been together before?" she asked. "I found out exactly 10 seconds before I sent you those pictures, I promised. I didn't add anything to them. I just forwarded them. He told me they barely knew each other when we met." I know. He used to joke that she was overly dramatic and needy. I know. He made me feel completely crazy for wondering why she suddenly pulled away from me. I closed my eyes, tears finally spilling over. "I know, honey." "Stop saying you know," she snapped. Then, silence. Then, quieter. I almost hate her a little less now. "I'm not saying I forgive her," Chloe added quickly, like she desperately needed to make sure I wouldn't mistake her complex grief for weakness. She still chose to do it. "Yes, she did. But he chose all of it." "Yes," she exhaled shakily. "I just don't know where to put all of this in my head." "I'm right here," I said softly. I know, that was all she gave me before hanging up, but it was enough oxygen to keep me breathing for another 24 hours. 3 days after the apartment confrontation, Liam showed up at Chloe's co-working studio, holding a massive bouquet of expensive flowers. Now, I am not anti-flower. I have thoroughly enjoyed a sad, discounted grocery store bouquet in my time. But when a 1-year-old man actively cheats on you for a year and a half and discusses your grandmother's inheritance like it's his personal retirement plan, flowers are not romantic. They are a bright yellow clearance sticker slapped onto a burning couch. Chloe told me the details later. He waited outside the glass doors, holding the flowers in both hands like he was starring in a pharmaceutical apology commercial. She almost walked right past him. But then he dropped his voice and said, "Please, baby. Just 5 minutes." And because 3 years of deep emotional programming doesn't just instantly evaporate from your nervous system just because your brain has logical evidence, she stopped and listened. He cried. Not full, ugly sobbing, she noted. Just exactly enough water pooling in his eyes to look human and vulnerable. He completely changed his story. He claimed Mia had aggressively pursued him. He said he was just a weak, flawed man. He said he had been terrified of losing Chloe because she was the only stable, pure thing in his chaotic life. He swore the text messages about the lake house money were just bad jokes taken out of context. Then, he pivoted back to his favorite weapon, me. He said I had always hated him. He said I had been eagerly waiting in the shadows for a reason to ruin him. He said I had weaponized her mentally unstable best friend because I couldn't stand the thought of watching my daughter build a family unit that didn't center around me. And Chloe admitted to me that there was a terrifying, fleeting moment where she almost believed him. She told him she needed space to think. He, of course, heard try harder to break her down. For a solid week, he sent her massive blocks of text messages every single day, using a different psychological angle each time. One day he was drowning in sorrow. The next he was deeply misunderstood. Then he was righteously angry. Then soft and nostalgic. One day he even got spiritual, which was entirely new and frankly insulting, because the man had never once cared about anything holy unless it could be legally deducted on his taxes or inherited in a will. He sent sweeping paragraphs about commitment, fear, human mistakes, and loyalty. He sent a pathetic picture of the velvet ring box sitting alone on his kitchen counter. He sent old vacation photos. Finally, he sent the text that sealed his fate. Don't let your bitter mother make this massive life decision for you. Then, he made the mistake of texting me directly. You had absolutely no legal right to share my private messages. I am currently speaking with someone about taking legal action against you for defamation. I laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. I typed back, those messages were voluntarily provided to me by the person who received them. Do not ever contact me again unless my daughter explicitly asks you to. Have a blessed day. Then I permanently blocked him. He tried my ex-husband next. How he managed to find the number, I will never know. Probably a mutual contact, or maybe he had secretly stored it in his phone from years of listening to Chloe talk about her family history. Thank God, my ex called Chloe first before responding. She told her father absolutely everything, not my biased version, her version. The affair, the undeniable screenshots, the money plotting, the lake house property, the $10,000 joint account, and the absolute audacity of Liam reaching out to a man who should have been too embarrassed to even breathe the same air as our family. My ex-husband did something he had not successfully done in over a decade. He actually helped. He didn't do it dramatically. He didn't storm over to Liam's apartment with a baseball bat. He didn't threaten anyone. He simply called Liam back and said, in a deadpan voice, that he would not be getting involved, that he believed his daughter 100%, and that any further contact with him would be immediately forwarded to a harassment lawyer. I found this out through Chloe's cousin, because my ex didn't even call me to beg for applause or a gold star. I appreciated that silence more than I ever expected to. Chloe finally stopped responding to Liam's essays. Desperate, he begged to stay over at her apartment for just one single night. This was after the blow-up, after the flowers, after the legal threats. He claimed he just needed to talk to her in person, face to face, without everyone else interfering in our love. Chloe told me later that she agreed to let him in because a tiny, broken part of her still wanted one uninterrupted truth. Not a reconciliation, exactly. More like she just desperately wanted to see if there was any shred left of the man she thought she had loved for 3 years. I did not like that she let him back into her apartment. I am telling you this now because I want full credit for biting my tongue and not saying it out loud to her then. That night, Liam fell asleep on her couch. His phone was sitting on the coffee table, face up, unlocked. So, she looked. First, she opened his messages. She found a thread with Mia from the exact week before the confrontation at my condo, not months before, not ancient history. The week before, they were still actively talking. They were still planning to meet up. They were still using their gross little private inside jokes while he was actively planning a massive engagement dinner and watching my elderly mother cry tears of joy over a diamond ring. Then, she opened his web browser. She found his recent search history. It wasn't just random, passing curiosity. They were highly specific, legally focused searches. Property division laws after marriage. Transfer of real estate deeds to spouse. Joint account legal protections. How inheritance works if assets are commingled. He had even saved a few notes in his app, little copied and pasted lines of legal jargon that made his malicious intent so crystal clear it was blinding. She said she felt almost eerily calm reading them. It was like her physical body was finally done absorbing shock. She walked over and shook his shoulder, waking him up. He blinked up at her from the couch cushions, looking confused, his hair messy, his face soft with sleep. She dropped the phone directly onto his chest, the screen brightly displaying his search history about her grandmother's lake house. Explain this to me, she demanded quietly. He sat up so fast he almost fell off the couch. Why the hell were you in my phone? Explain it, Liam. That is a massive violation of my privacy. That is not okay, he yelled, scrambling to grab the phone. She laughed. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't happy. That's the hill you're going to die on? Privacy? He started rapidly cycling through his tactics. First came aggressive denial, then outrage over his privacy. Then he tried to claim he was just researching to protect their future assets. And finally, when he was completely backed into a corner, he pulled out the exact same sentence he always used. Your paranoid mother did this to you. She poisoned your mind. Chloe told me that was the exact moment the final lock clicked open in her brain. Not the affair, not the horrifying real estate searches, not the secret messages. It was that specific sentence. Because even with his own unlocked phone sitting between them, displaying undeniable proof of his premeditated financial abuse, he still tried to make me the weapon. He literally could not fathom the idea that Chloe possessed an independent thought that didn't belong to someone else. If she loved him blindly, her feelings were real. If she doubted him for a second, someone else must have planted the seed. She calmly slid the diamond engagement ring off her finger and placed it exactly in the center of the coffee table. We are completely done, she said. He exploded. He called her cruel. He called her ungrateful, stupid, and easily manipulated. He screamed that she was throwing away a beautiful future just because her mother couldn't manage to keep her own marriage together. There it was again, my old, dusty wound being violently dragged into a room where I wasn't even standing. But this time, my daughter didn't pick up the weapon. She walked over, opened the front door wide, and pointed into the hallway. Leave. He refused at first. He aggressively paced the small living room. He argued loudly. He forced himself to cry again. He lunged forward to try and hug her, and she stepped back so quickly and with so much disgust that he finally froze. Finally, she pulled out her phone and ordered an Uber for him, because apparently, even ending a deeply abusive engagement requires administrative work on the woman's part. He finally walked out the door with the ring shoved in his pocket, his fragile pride leaking all over the hallway carpet. At 2 a.m., my phone rang. I was already awake. I don't know why. Maybe mothers just have some stupid, primal animal sense when their kids are in danger. Maybe my anxiety is just incredibly punctual. I answered on the very first ring. "Mom," she whispered. That was all. One single word. And I was already sitting up in bed, my feet hitting the floor. "I'm right here." I ended it. I closed my eyes so hard the room spun. "Are you physically safe?" "Yes." "Is he completely gone?" "Yes." "Do you want me to come over right now?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, her voice cracking, "Can you?" I drove over in my pajamas. I did not say "I told you so." I did not say "finally." I did not say a single negative word about him. I walked in, wrapped my arms around her, and said, "I've got you." Because sometimes the absolute simplest sentence is the only one that won't make everything infinitely worse. We sat on her floor, and she opened her laptop. She logged into the $10,000 joint account and stared at the balance. The money was still mostly there. He hadn't drained it entirely. But he had been quietly moving small, strategic amounts out over the last few months. Not enough to trigger a massive fight, but enough to blur the financial edges. A fancy dinner here, a shared expense there, a utility payment she thought was for something else. It wasn't the full $10,000 anymore, but it was enough missing money to make her feel profoundly stupid all over again. "I just let him do that to me," she cried, hiding her face in her hands. "You trusted the man you were going to marry," I corrected her gently. "That's just a really cute motherly way to say I was a naive idiot." "No," I said firmly. "That's a motherly way to say I am not going to sit here and help you beat yourself up with his stick." She let out a wet, exhausted little laugh. Then she cried so hard we just stayed on the floor, because sitting on the furniture suddenly felt way too formal for the amount of grief in the room. UP Date 4, the aftermath and the healing. We spent the next morning making a strict, actionable list, because making lists is exactly what the women in my family do when our feelings are entirely too large to fit through the door frame. 1. Close the joint account and transfer the remaining balance. 2. Change every single password on every device. 3. Inform the apartment landlord that Liam was permanently banned from the premises. 4. Box up and return anything he left behind. 5. Tell the extended family before he could spin a prettier, victimized version of the story. 6. Decide what to do about Mia. 7. Call Grandma. Calling my mother was the task that terrified Chloe the most, but when my daughter finally started crying on the phone, my tough, stoic mother's voice instantly softened. "You come over for Sunday dinner whenever you are ready, Chloe. And do not bring shame into my house. I do not cook food for shame." When my mother learned about the specific text messages regarding her lake house property, she didn't cry. She didn't fly into a rage. She simply asked me to print out physical copies of the screenshots. The very next morning, she called her estate lawyer. It was as simple and cold as that. No dramatic speeches, no family counsel. She immediately formalized ironclad legal protections around the property deed, so it could never, ever be accidentally dragged into some future marriage or commingled asset dispute without explicit, independent legal paperwork. Chloe felt deeply embarrassed, like she had caused a massive legal headache. My mother just patted her hand and said, "Protection is never trouble, Chloe. Foolishness is trouble. We are simply correcting the map." Meanwhile, Mia started rapidly losing people in her life. Not because Chloe made some grand, vindictive announcement on social media. She didn't. Chloe only told the people who absolutely needed to know. And unfortunately for Mia, enough people needed to know. Friend groups are delicate ecosystems. Someone suddenly disappears from the group chats. Someone asks why. Someone tells a partial truth. And someone else happily fills in the rest of the blanks. There were no public screaming matches at bars. There was no dramatic group chat trial. People just quietly stopped inviting Mia to things. They stopped replying to her texts quickly. They stopped pretending that a calculated, year-and-a-half-long betrayal could be neatly folded into the excuse of "I was manipulated by a man." As for Liam, his carefully curated life began to peel open much slower, revealing the rot underneath. It turned out he had massive financial debts, far more than Chloe ever knew. Credit cards, personal bank loans, and payment plans stacked up like dirty dishes in a sink. He had been living a lifestyle vastly richer than his recruiter paycheck actually allowed, because people who sell fake confidence for a living often start buying their own act. He was roughly $25,000 in the hole. Chloe managed to piece this together from old shared bank statements and one accidental collections letter that arrived at her apartment after he moved out because changing his mailing address was apparently beneath his genius intellect. I am not going to pretend I didn't deeply enjoy that particular discovery. He tried to reach Chloe a few more times through distant acquaintances, a random coworker, an old college friend, a cousin's friend's boyfriend. You know how toxic men suddenly become passionate community organizers the second they lose direct access to their victim? Everyone got the exact same script. He just wanted closure. He just wanted one final conversation. He just wanted her to know he still deeply cared about her soul. Chloe's reply, delivered through a mutual friend, was short and lethal. There is absolutely nothing left to close. Instead of texting, I wrote Chloe a letter, an actual, physical paper letter, because apparently I become incredibly old-fashioned when I am emotionally cornered. I left it at her apartment door with a fresh container of chicken soup. In the letter, I told her I loved her unconditionally. I told her I was always available to talk, and I explicitly told her that she did not have to perform being okay for my benefit. I did not mention Liam's name a single time. I did not mention being right about him. I did not ask for an apology for the horrible things she said to me at lunch. I wanted to, of course. I am a flawed human being, not a scented candle, but I didn't. She showed up at my condo on a Sunday afternoon, completely unannounced. I opened my front door wearing an oversized sweatshirt and holding a plastic laundry basket, which is exactly the aesthetic you want for a major emotional reunion. She stood in the hallway with red, puffy eyes and zero makeup, and for a long second, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "I really don't know how to do this." I slowly put the laundry basket down on the floor. Me neither. She stepped forward, and we hugged. It wasn't a pretty, cinematic hug. It was a desperate, awkward, entirely too tight hug, with our elbows jabbing into weird places. She cried into my shoulder, and I cried into her messy hair. I swear to God, my ugly mustard yellow bathroom tile could have cracked from the sheer amount of relief flooding that hallway. "I am so sorry, Mom," she sobbed. I almost said, "It's okay," but it wasn't okay. And saying it was okay would have made her painful apology so much smaller than it needed to be. So I just said, "I know." She cried harder, her grip tightening. "I hated that you knew the truth," she confessed. "I hated that you saw me being so stupid." "You were never stupid, Chloe." "Mom, you weren't there. I gave him my money. I let him isolate me. I tried to build a whole life with him while he was laughing at me. I ignored all your warnings. I said awful, unforgivable things to you." "Yes," I said softly, pulling back just enough to look her in the eyes. "You did, and they hurt me deeply. I'm not going to pretend they didn't. But I also know exactly where those words came from. They came from him. Some of them. Not all of them, but the ones that mattered. Therapy made things significantly worse for her before it made them better. Not because the therapist was bad, but because therapy forces you to open drawers you've been holding shut with your bare hands." She began noticing how often she had minimized her own physical discomfort just to keep the peace in the apartment, how she had constantly mistaken his aggressive jealousy for romantic investment, how every single time he successfully isolated her from a friend, he expertly framed it as loyalty to the relationship, how she defended him the hardest when she was subconsciously the most terrified he might leave her. One evening, while we were making dinner at my place, she casually said, "I think I pushed back against you so hard because I was terrified of becoming you." She was aggressively chopping onions at the time. Great timing, built-in tears. "Divorced?" I asked quietly. "Or alone?" There it was, the sharp, honest truth sitting on the cutting board. I put my knife down. "That really hurt, Chloe." "I know, I'm so sorry." "No, I'm not mad that you said it. I'm mad because I think you actually believed it." She sat down at my kitchen table, anxiously twisting her sleeve the exact same way Mia had done at the coffee shop. "I did believe it. I worked so hard my entire life to make sure you didn't feel the divorce like it was some kind of generational curse." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Maybe I made being single look like basic survival instead of an actual life." "You did survive, Mom." "Yes, but I also lived, Chloe. I had wonderful friends. I laughed until my ribs hurt. I dated badly a few times and spared you the gory details because I love you. I paid off this entire condo by myself. I built a solid career. I even kept a fiddle-leaf fig alive for almost an entire month once." She laughed through her tears. "I was lonely sometimes," I admitted, "but I was never a warning sign for you to run from." The biggest freelance project of her entire career landed right in the middle of that messy, painful rebuilding period. It was a massive contract with a corporate communications company worth $7,500. It was the exact kind of project that made her sit back from her laptop screen and whisper, "Oh my God," like she had just stumbled across a buried treasure map. She took a screenshot of the acceptance email and sent it to me. I immediately replied, "I am so incredibly proud of you. Dinner is on me tonight." Our Sunday lunches returned slowly. At first, it was just every other week. Then it became more frequent. My mother started joining us sometimes, bringing heavy food in glass containers and loud opinions that absolutely no one requested. My brother came over once and awkwardly stood in the kitchen, apologizing for not noticing Liam's controlling behavior more at the engagement dinner. Chloe smiled and told him, "You noticed enough to pull Mom aside and say something." He nodded, looking deeply relieved that it mattered. It did. 10 months after the explosive breakup, Chloe officially moved into a much smaller apartment across town. It's $1,400 a month. It's an older brick building with a weirdly shaped hallway closet and a kitchen so tiny you can touch both walls at once. But it is entirely hers. There is no joint bank account to monitor. There is no man sitting on the couch giving his unsolicited opinion on where her desk should go. There is no one aggressively asking who she is, texting at 9:00 p.m. The very first night she moved in, she sent me a picture of a single-floor lamp sitting on the bare hardwood because she hadn't bought a table yet. The caption just said, "Decor." I wrote back, "Very modern minimalist, very divorced from nonsense." Liam tried to reach out exactly one more time, through a woman they both used to casually know. He said he just wanted closure. He wanted a brief conversation. He wanted Chloe to know that he was actively working on himself. That specific phrase should legally require a permit to use. Chloe replied directly through the same woman, "I really hope he keeps working on himself, but I am officially no longer part of the project." Mia actually sent a long message around that same time too. It was deeply apologetic. She said she fully understood if Chloe never replied. She said she had finally started intensive therapy. She said she knew that being emotionally manipulated by Liam didn't magically erase the devastating choices she had made. She said she missed her best friend every day. She said she was profoundly sorry for every fake dinner, every lie by omission, and every single moment she sat there and let Chloe look like a fool while she protected her own secret. Chloe showed me the long text message while we were eating lunch. We sat there with my mother's leftover baked ziti between us, reading the glowing screen on the table. "What do you think?" she asked me quietly. "I think it sounds incredibly sincere," I answered honestly. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. "And I also think that someone being sincere doesn't mean you automatically owe them access to your life." She nodded slowly, absorbing it. "Do you want to answer her?" I asked. "No." "Then don't." "That's it?" "That's it." She picked up the phone and placed it face down on the table. For a fleeting moment, I thought she might start crying. Instead, she took a large bite of the ziti and said, "Grandma seriously put way too much black pepper in this. She truly believes black pepper is a substitute for a personality." I agreed. These days, our Sunday routines are fully back, but they are different. They are better in some ways. They are less automatic and much more intentionally chosen. My mother joins us once a month, specifically wearing bright red lipstick just to eat in my tiny kitchen because she insists that personal standards still matter. Chloe brings dessert sometimes from a little independent bakery near her new apartment, always jokingly pretending she baked it from scratch until we all agree to politely lie and praise her culinary skills. We talk about work, her rising rent, my dental patients without using their real names, her demanding clients without losing our patience, my upcoming recertification, her terrible hallway closet, and my brother's absolute inability to buy a birthday gift that isn't a scented candle. A few weeks ago, Chloe called me right before breakfast on a Sunday morning. I was standing in my kitchen with wet hair, one fuzzy sock on, staring blankly at my black coffee like it might magically become solid food if I believed hard enough. "What are you making?" she asked through the speaker. "I am making an executive decision to completely ignore my personal nutrition," I replied. She laughed. It was a real laugh. It was the old one, but it sounded slightly older, slightly changed, and still entirely hers. Then she said, "I'll come over. I'll bring fresh bagels." "Good," I said, smiling at the wall. "Bring the kind I actually like." "You mean the incredibly boring kind?" "I mean the correct kind." She laughed again and hung up the phone. And I just stood there in the quiet kitchen for a second longer than necessary, holding my phone against my chest, letting the absolute normalness of it all settle deep into my bones. It wasn't a perfect ending. We weren't magically healed in some shiny, cinematic way. It was just normal, just Sunday morning coffee. Just a daughter actively choosing to come over because she genuinely wanted to, not because anyone violently managed her, guilted her, tracked her location, or told her what love was supposed to cost. And for me, that was more than enough.